Thanks very much for watching. Thank you for your comments. Keep them coming via Twitter on the hashtag of PM Live. Time to talk to our panel now about politics and the rest of the day's news. My colleague at Radio TUE in Sydney is John Stanley, our carryover champ every Monday night. How are you, sir?
Paul, how are you?
Very good. Now, your view about Iran versus Israel? No, we'll get to that very shortly.
Good.
Yeah. Former Defence Minister and Howard Government Minister. He joins us now from Melbourne. Peter Reith, good evening to you.
G'day, Paul. Good to see you.
You and I, we could probably get involved in the hour-long conversation about the Middle East. And and she's the boss of the Australian Women's Weekly with very passionate views about Israel versus Iran and all the rest of it. Helen McCabe, how are you?
Good evening.
She doesn't have passionate views about it, just in case you get verbaled by some lobby group. Like you care, but anyway.
Yes.
All right, let's get into the obvious. Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard and the whole catastrophe that is this now. I said it at the start of the show. I think that the strongest thing that she can do to reinforce her prime ministership and however long it has left, be it the weeks, the months or the 18 months, is to sack Kevin Rudd. He clearly wants to go for the coup. He should be doing it from the backbench, not from Brussels. Helen, what do you reckon?
I don't think she can, and I'm intrigued as to why you think she can. I don't think the argument's even there at the moment that, as far as he's concerned, and as far as the public are concerned, he's just doing his job. He's in Brussels, he's in Zurich, he's just being the foreign minister.
Yeah.
I don't think the Labor Party has mounted the argument about why it dumped him in the first place, and she would struggle to mount the argument for why she's dumping him again. They keep saying it's all the media's fault. And then she's going to come out and sack him when it's all the media's fault?
The people that have been leaping in all day saying it's the media's obsession. Look, this is the Telegraph today. Telegraph in Sydney, list of her supporters, list of his supporters. Where does that come from? I mean,
I've got no doubt where it's coming from.
Yeah, which
means...
I
know it's coming from Kevin Rudd. There's no doubt in my mind.
So isn't that the justification for Tata?
If not, my argument is the Labor Party is failing to mount the argument about Kevin Rudd's failures in government and as a leader. They haven't explained to us really properly why they got rid of him in the first place, and they'd struggle to explain why she sacks him this time, when most of the time she's going out saying he's the best foreign minister this country's ever had.
Well, and also the whole thing is that exactly the argument I made against not going to Julia Gillard is the same argument I would put out there for not going to Kevin Rudd. Changing Prime Minister doesn't change the competency of certain ministers, doesn't change the numbers on the floor. Peter, to that central question, if you were the Prime Minister, would you sack Kevin Rudd? Would you sack the bloke who clearly is going to knife you now or a little further down the track?
The reason it's sort of the right question is that he is the source of her particular problems because he's always linking to the media. Every time she says something, he jumps up and does a doorstop and they all start talking about leadership. So it's the right question in the sense of she's got a real problem with Kevin Rudd. What do you do about it? That's the question. Now, whether sacking him, quite frankly, would make any difference really is a big question mark. I mean, whether you're in the tent or out the tent, the fact is he is running a campaign against her. And I don't think whether he's on the backbench or the front bench in the end is going to make any difference. If she does sack him, it may bring the fight on now. We honestly don't know. But he's not going to go away. He is determined to get the job back. He's on a path of revenge. And, you know, look, I know everybody's complaining about the media. And, look, I like to complain about them as well. You know, they tell porkies, they exaggerate, they just do it for the money, you know, to boost their circulations. All those things are true. But in the end, this is a problem. It's a problem not caused by the press. It's a problem because the Labor Party's got a problem.
Correct. So, and that's the thing. You know, but back to that central question, then we'll get into all the variables. Am I right or wrong? That this is what she should be doing?
I don't think so. I think it would make things worse. I think it would actually make things worse for her because there's no grounds for sacking you. You can't say, I'm sacking you because I suspect you've done a lot of things. Look at John Howard back in the 80s. He was running a guerrilla campaign against Andrew Peacock, but it was all done in such a way that you could never find the fingerprints. And ultimately,
that's done in opposition.
Yeah, I know. That's a different thing.
I'm saying the consequences of that stuff.
Yeah, but in this case, well, that's what makes this worse because they're in government. They've got this situation where they've got a minority government. So you put him on the backbench. Instead of having him out of the country half the time, he'd be be appearing in every MP's electorate. He'd be casting himself as the martyr. It would bring the thing out in the open. It would raise questions about her judgment. I spoke to someone who's a Rudd supporter last week who didn't want him to go in the first place and thinks it's a mistake. I said, well, would he learn if he became Prime Minister again? Who knows? They don't know. They don't. I mean,
he would definitely be martyred. I think that's an excellent point. That he's already been martyred once. The public would just be an outcry if they then sacked him when he looks like a pretty competent foreign minister.
But the thing is, in the conversations that we all have every weekend, is that with the people who aren't as attuned to it as you watching and us talking about it, those people who don't care about these conversations, they understand that he's the source of her problem. Like, they still understand that he's not virginal white figure.
Unless you can get him out of the parliament, he's not going to go away, which is what Peter's point was.
So this is my thing: is that okay? Why does he get to represent Australia? I mean, the fact that these guys can't do a joint media conference. No one in the gallery I spoke to today, and I spoke to about half a dozen people, said they can't stand together. Now, Howard and Costello, I mean, pick your list. They all hated each other, but they could still stand there in front of the cameras and at least play the game.
Well, apparently he can't even say her name.
Well, but how absurd is that? That we all know
it's
that
not
that's
a great situation.
But that's what I'm saying. But we know that that's the case. But somehow this guy gets to cut from within, gets to keep his job, and gets to fly around the world doing.
I think it's the Labor Party's job to tell us what is wrong with him and why he's not suitable for the job. Peter? It's not our job.
Oh, sorry, Peter. What do you think of that?
Well, I was only going to say, I mean, talk about deja vu. I mean, we did go through this, all through the Howard Peacock contest. And there's quite a good argument to say we lost the 87 election because of internal divisions. We lost the 1990 election because even though Andrew had come back, there was still a sense of division. And then we finally got another leader in Houston who probably had the right idea but wasn't savvy enough politically. Now, this is the problem on Labor's side. She's basically not up to it, but it's very hard to see how you can go back to Kevin. So they're basically searching for a new leader, but no one knows who that's going to be. And in the meantime, they've got this conundrum. Keep Kevin, sack Kevin. What do you do with Kevin? Well, actually, there is no answer to what you do with Kevin. And they are just going to bleed. And, I mean, you got to laugh. I mean, the polls go up a fraction today, and they're all saying, oh, thank heavens, the leadership issue's over.
That's a fascinating thing.
Until the next poll.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that's a fascinating thing. And I think, John, this is an area where the media can cop criticism. The nonsense that this thing is so brittle that if you go up by 1 point in a poll, somehow it's a reprieve. If you go down by one, your leadership's within an inch of that's nonsense.
Well, it is nonsense.
And it's nonsense to view things in that
But the reason she's in trouble is less to do with the polls, because they've moved within a few points up and down. It's because of the monumental blunders, the series of blunders, the Australia Day fiasco, and then going back, you talk about the two of them together, they had a kiss on the floor of the Parliament when the carbon tax legislation went through, and a few weeks later, moronically, she's gone and given a speech at the ALP conference and not mentioned his name. I mean, how dumb was that? It was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen politically.
But it's one of those things where remember when there was the salary cap nonsense, sorry to get sporty about this, but when the Melbourne Storm lost all their points, lost all their premierships, there was this defiant act when the coach and captain and key players all walked out together. It was a bit twee, but walking out saying, we will not be beaten. A couple of seasons later, they're in a grand final. At some point in time, doesn't Julia Gillard need to show the bulk of people who are behind her and just to start winning the picture war? Because currently it works that they never stand together, she won't say her name, nobody will stand there unless they've been dragged to do it. I mean, she wants to play this for longer than 2 weeks. So I think you've got to start throwing haymakers that show you're annoyed that this keeps happening.
Look, I think she did okay today. I think doing the press conference today and then having a series...
She was rude to David Spears.
A series... Oh, well, we can't have that.
No, I won't cop that.
Never be rude to David Spears.
No.
Look, there was a number of ministers came out and quite convincingly defended her from COMBE down. So I think she did perform quite well today. What does need to happen, however, is that those that are adding to the fuel to the fire around Kevin Rudd need to pull their head in so that she can get some momentum. And the other thing that needs to happen is they need to start looking at a third person. They need to start looking at an alternative. If she falls over, she looks very weak. The public hate her, or the polls are terrible for
No,
her,
absolutely.
whichever way you look at it. So they do need, I think, to look at a third candidate.
This is the Pete, you get the last word, and then we'll take a break and come back with Bob Brown's nonsense about sexism. Yeah.
I agree with that, except I just have to say this, though. She gets 1 minute of sunshine and people are saying, oh, maybe she'll get some momentum. I mean, they've been saying that for 6 months. And John was quite right. You know, look at the big issues, the race right sort of issue. I mean, there she was saying, oh, Tony, I better look after Tony. And then we find out that her office was involved in setting the thing up. I mean, the slipper deal, the Fair Work Australia deal, the Wilkie deal, the break of the promise. I mean, just one issue after another. That's a real problem.
All right. Keen to know what you think. We'll continue the conversation and then move it on to the rest of the day's news in a moment. We're live across the country, only on Sky News. Hit us up on Twitter, PM Live. Thank you for watching. I'm here in conversation with Peter Reith, who joins us from Melbourne, and with me at the desk is Helen McCabe and John Stanley. Interesting thing was thrown in at the last minute about all of the criticism of the Prime Minister from Bob Brown today. I think this is way off, but what does the panel think? Have a look.
Degree of relentless criticism on this Prime Minister coming from male commentators is probably all subconscious, but is sexist and quite ridiculous at times.
Well, Bob, I wish I could change my gender in order to be able to criticise the Prime Minister appropriately. I criticise the Prime Minister because she's a bad Prime Minister. I don't like her as a politician. She's a bad politician. She's a bad administrator of things. That's why I criticise the Prime Minister. I try not to say she and her and that as much as possible. Helen, forgive me for asking the obvious. Do you think that some of it at the edges and some of the nutty stuff on the internet is sexist? Is the broad-based editorial comment in newspapers and stuff like people like me say on the radio and TV sexist?
I feared when she took the job that she would get some sexist remarks. I think she does get some sexist remarks, but I think that just goes with the job. She's a woman. If you're a bloke and you have hairy eyebrows, or you're overweight and you're Kim Beazley, or you wear odd glasses, you get criticised for all that stuff as well. I think we're a little bit hypersensitive. But having said that, I do think one of those interviews with Alan Jones did with the Prime Minister was sexist out and out. So, I think there is some room for criticism. But generally, when you're the Prime Minister, everything's fair game. You get criticised for the lot. And if there's gender issues involved, you're going to cop it, just like when you're a bloke and you be overly blokey. Who's the opposition leader? Tony Abbott. He gets criticised. He gets criticised for riding bikes and wearing Speedos. And so exactly. I think there are... I think we get a little bit hung up on the sexist thing.
I always think the family and wedding and kids, that's the sexist stuff. She's a bad, or she can't connect with the electorate. That's not a sexist statement, John. It's just an observation of her as a politician.
Yeah, well, see, I don't think those criticisms are justified, but I also think when you look at it, it is a male commentariat, isn't it? Broadcasters, it's principally all the broadcasters are male, and I remember John Laws used to call a workplace relations minister, industrial relations minister in the Howard government, a bespectable buffoon. Now that's pretty tough stuff. He used to dish that out to a lot of people, and I think the person concerned, I don't know if he wears the specs anymore, but this is the thing. I think you go back to Billy McMahon. He didn't have... Billy McMahon used to cop the most awful bollocking, and I think if you're talking leaders... I just don't think she's got the respect and the gravitas as a leader, and that's why people go for her.
But that's the thing. I mean, to me, it also seems like Peter, that's Bob Brown throwing that thing out there that hopefully we'll debate for 15 minutes. Other than does the Prime Minister have the numbers or not? So he gets some success for a couple of minutes. Do you think that there is a sexist nature to the criticism and observation of the Prime Minister?
Well, what Bob said was that the criticism of her was relentless. Now, I'd have to say, name me a Prime Minister who hasn't been the subject of relentless criticism, and I don't know how anybody could suggest that, the criticism that she's had has been more relentless than what John Howard had, both as Prime Minister and as, at one stage, Mr 18% on the front page of the Bulletin. So, and I've had a bit of relentless stuff thrown at me as well, too, in the waterfront dispute. I mean, it basically comes with the territory. And, I mean, if there's some elements to it there, which there may well be to some degree, but I think when it comes to the basic issues about what's happening, I don't think any of it's really got anything to do with sexism. I mean, it would be better if the debate was purely about policy, because honestly that's what would be in the public interest, in the sense that good decisions need to be made, so we need to talk about things beforehand. But, people are people. They will make sort of aside comments on the personality. I think the point about Julia, and it came out from a couple of mates of mine who were at the speech she gave the other day in Melbourne for the Australia-Israel Chamber of Commerce. She was very wooden in that presentation. She just stuck entirely to the script. It wasn't her. It didn't come across in a warm sort of way. And I think basically it's because she's just under a hell of a lot of pressure. And I think some of that pressure is of her own making. And I'd have to say too, it reminds me of what John Howard said a few months ago. Because she was a minority leader, she's never really had the authority. And because she's never really had the authority, she hasn't sort of had that confidence, that sort of sense of being in charge that emanated so obviously, from John Howard, Paul Keating, Bob Hawke and some of the others. And in that sense, she's always under the hammer. I think she will be until she goes.
Now, this is the thing. I do want to move on, but there's just so much to this that's there. Last night, on Sunday night on Channel 7, it's worth playing a little bit of that conversation, where I think the Prime Minister missed the chance to just be a bit more open and honest and candid, dare I say, when she was being asked fairly direct questions she's been asked a million times before, but it's primetime TV. In a 15-minute interview, it's better than the 4-second grab that often runs on the news. I think she missed the point, but here's part of what aired on the Sunday night program last night.
You've got a problem. You've got people in your party moving to oust you from the leadership, and I really want to ask you, why have you allowed it to go so long?
I think Kevin's doing a good job as the Minister for Foreign Affairs. But, Mike, I don't get up in the morning thinking about all of this.
In 68, Whitlam had a situation like this. In 91, Hawke, they went into the caucus and said, I quit. The position of leadership is open, and it was resolved. Why don't you do that?
Because I believe Kevin's doing a good job as the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and I'm very confident in my leadership of the Labor Party.
Is he doing a good job of destabilising your leadership?
Mike, once again, I'm not agreeing with the premises of your question.
Let me just push you for one direct answer. Why don't you just call a showdown in the caucus?
Because there's no need. I'm very confident in my leadership of the Labor Party.
Look at the daily headlines. They're so debilitating and so bad for your government.
Look, I'm not going to determine what I do as Prime Minister because of headlines in newspapers. I'm going to determine what I do as Prime Minister for what's right for the nation.
Actually, I will make a sexist comment. Mr Willis, he has a spectacular voice. Now, what is, again, worth noting in all of that was I thought she had a chance to do something different, and it was the same thing as if I was talking to her here.
Yeah, she really struggles, and she didn't give any warmth at all, and her answers are so political, they're so spin-like. The question he goes on to ask is, do you have any emotion? You can sort of see why he asked it, because he was trying to crack through.
Making reference to the wall. I've gone, wow, okay.
And she that's when she fired up, and that's when she actually was really interesting, saying, "I'm actually not a performing seal. I'm not an Australian drama." And that's when she made some really interesting points about the role of Prime Minister and looked real and genuine. But other than that, she struggles.
All right, we're going to take a break and then get to the rest of the day's news, because there's a lot of it, including will there be an interest rate cut tomorrow? We'll talk a little bit of Super Bowl as well, and Qantas. Guess what? They're saying things cost a lot of money and they don't want laws to change. More in a sec. Thank you very much for watching. I'm here in conversation with Helen McCabe, deeply ensconced in your tweets, by the way. Hashtag at PM Live. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you just go searching for PM On Air, and you can get the links to everyone who's here on the show and find them on Twitter. John Stanley is here from Radio 2UE, and former Howard Government Minister, who's also on Twitter as well as John and Helen, is Peter, who joins us from Melbourne. Now, Peter, you'd be a massive Super Bowl man, wouldn't you? You were sitting there for 4 hours, guacamole, some bud, you were on the Giants the whole way.
Well, I was backing Madonna, but I don't know whether she was doing anything other than a sing-song. But, yeah, it was a close game in the end, but I've never understood the game, I must admit.
I think of it this way. It's chess when the pieces are big blokes. That's the best way to try and work it out. Now, all of the ads, all the performances, there's criticism of Madonna for lip-syncing and a few things, but she's 53 years old and put on a massive show. Hard thing for her is to shock these days because Lady Gaga stole her whole act. So anyway, but of all of the ads, this is the one that I think was pretty impressive. It was paid for by Chevy, but you don't actually see any Chevy branding that's in it. It's Clint Eastwood, and it's just a minute or so of Super Americana. But have a look.
It's halftime. Both teams are in their locker room discussing what they can do to win this game in the second half. It's halftime in America, too. People are out of work and they're hurting, and they're all wondering what they're going to do to make a comeback. And we're all scared because this isn't a game. The people of Detroit know a little something about this. They almost lost everything. But we all pulled together. Now Motor City is fighting again. I've seen a lot of tough eras, a lot of downturns in my life, and times when we didn't understand each other. It seems that we've lost our heart at times. The fog of division, discord, and blame made it hard to see what lies ahead. But after those trials, we all rallied around what was right and acted as one. Because that's what we do. We find a way through tough times, and if we can't find a way, then we'll make one. All that matters now is what's ahead. How do we come from behind? How do we come together? And how do we win? Detroit's showing us it can be done. And what's true about them is true about all of us. This country can't be knocked out with one punch. We get right back up again, and when we do, the world's going to hear the roar of our engines. Yeah, it's halftime America, and our second half's about to begin.
Kind of cool. Paid for by all of those different companies. Wasn't Chrysler, it was Chevy. The ads cost $3 million per 30 seconds. Imagine what a full 2 minutes in the middle of the game cost. Front page of the New York Post, by the way, unsurprisingly celebrating the come-from-behind win. I love those ads. I love that stuff.
That was just great.
But it's that thing.
I could listen to him all night, though.
Yeah, exactly. Sexist. So sexist. John, I mean, I love all the ads, but to be honest, I like that one's about a whole lot more than just flogging the cars. It's that, 4 years ago, the industry was stuffed, and Obama and others turned around and went, you know what, we're going to pick it up.
Incredible, actually. I mean, the car industry here's got a few problems, and I know that the super coach in the NRL, Wayne Bennett, one of his idols is Clint Eastwood. You could actually see Wayne Bennett doing that ad, couldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Half-time of the NRL.
That's a good
idea.
idea.
You could see him, because he actually walks and talks a bit like Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Geez, all right, I hadn't thought of it that way.
There's a thought.
But I like it. I like
You
the
can have
thinking
it.
here. All right, now Qantas and its CEO, Alan Joyce, appeared in Parliament today. There is conversation about changing laws in and around how the airline would run and exactly who they would be able to employ. Unsurprisingly, they don't like the idea, and he was being very scary about selling off parts of the airline just to make sure that it can stay afloat. Here he was in Canberra.
We have grave fears for the future of Qantas if these legislation proposals come into effect. We want our position clearly understood and on the record because history will judge. The legislation proposed would constitute a major threat to our business, to Australian jobs in the cities and the regions, to investment and to growth.
The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Peter, how many times can Qantas do this before eventually something doesn't actually go their way?
Well, I mean, companies are entitled to employ whoever they want to, and to keep their companies successful, competitive and the like, the idea that Nick Xenophon can put through a piece of legislation in the Australian Parliament and restrict the capacity of an Australian-listed company as to who it employs is really absurd. He is just, quite frankly, a populist. He's no longer anything other than a single member of the Senate. He doesn't hold the balance of power. This sort of legislative thing is just it's just a trick, a fix, a way of getting a bit of attention to Nick Xenophon. So let's just hope it gets dumped straight away. It's a crazy idea, and good on Alan Joyce. I mean, look, he's just talking common sense in the same way that he dealt with the unions. Here he is, he's got to deal with the Senate. I mean, it really is sort of typical of some of these senators to put up a scheme like this. let's hope they deal with it quickly.
A couple of minutes left, and there is a trend that's been building in all the major capitals for a long time, is that giant stores get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's more and more of them. Something like a Bunnings then turns into an IKEA, then turns into a Costco, then will eventually turn into a Walmart and all the rest of it. I don't like those massive super shops. Been to them and all that stuff, but I don't. That's not how I like to shop. How do you feel about the mega stores? There's plans for more IKEAs and all the rest of it.
Oh, well, I get lost in them, so I'm not good. But I don't see any problem. I think if it makes life for families easier to stop, park out the front, have a barbecue sausage, and put the kids in a playpen and buy your bed and your chest of drawers in one. Look, I don't have an objection to it. I think it's a very kind of inner city, kind of Sydney thing to criticise. Good luck to the families who enjoy shopping that way.
Dick Smith says of these things that eventually we're sort of going to slowly but surely end up with the Walmart and like those massive American companies that can sell everything for a third of whatever because it's just one company buying on the behalf of everyone. Do you like the big shops?
This is the thing. I think there are two kinds of people. There are people who love IKEA, and there are the IKEA snobs that won't go there. In my house, unfortunately, there's me. I love IKEA, and we've got a couple of IKEA snobs. So there's a bit of a drama there. But I love nothing more than shopping at IKEA, getting out the Allen key and spending
Do you get the little paper measuring thing and do all that?
Yeah, it's part of the joy of the place.
Well, but
sorry.
It's not about IKEA necessarily isn't my issue. My issue is these massive stores that turn around and can sell cheap hammers where the store up the road just gets screwed over. Because, I mean, sure, everyone wants to save cash.
That's just the way of the world. Yeah. And those big shopping centres are now under threat from the internet anyway, because you can just dial it up and have it delivered to your door. And so that's just the way of the world.
Peter, do you like those superstores, few of them popping up in Melbourne?
I don't think it matters what I think. I mean, the only question here is what do the consumers want? And if they want to go to a big shop, good luck to them. And if no one goes to these big shops, they'll go broke. Great. I'm for freedom, mate. And as for Dick Smith, I mean, Dick Smith says, let's have Vegemite made in Australia, but he gets his planes maintained in Singapore. Now, come on, Dick. He's a good bloke and a great Australian, but we need free enterprise in this country. We need more of it, not less of it.
Well, Peter, I know ultimately it doesn't matter. The problem is that that's what we do here for a full hour on the show. I need you to care about stuff. We'll see you soon in a couple of weeks, mate. Take care. See you guys. See you very soon. Yeah, all right, make sure you buy the Women's Weekly. It's on shelves now. Who's on the front cover? Just really quickly.
And Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep. Buy 2 copies. She's a happy lady. See you tomorrow night. Follow me on Twitter. It is @PM on Air. See you later.